And CBS News weather producer David Parkinson joins me now. David, thank you so much for being here. So what were conditions like when Dorian made landfall in North Carolina?
So the really interesting thing about that landfall was that at 8:35 this morning, and we were really a little unsure, was it going to do it, was it not, because the center of the eye has to pass over the land there. The reason why you saw the pictures that you saw in Omar's report is because the storm was so close. It had the most intense winds. It had 90-mile-an-hour winds. It had the strongest pressure. And so you're going to get this sudden rise of water. What's really interesting, if you take a look at the actual water rise that we have, I think, on our scan computer, there it is. You can see it almost looks like a tsunami. It just looks like an instant rise there of 6 feet of water. You went from a tide height of 0 feet to 6.37 feet in under 20 minutes.
That's quite extraordinary.
Right, and that's what we talk about storm surge, of why it's so critical to evacuate for storm surge, because when you get a water rise like that, if you're out on the street...
There's no way you can outrun that.
First off, it's going to knock your car over, it's going to knock you over, there's no way you can outrun it, you have to get to high ground, and there is no high ground on a place like Ocracoke, so that's the serious situation that they have there. Elsewhere, damaging wind certainly was possible. We had, some roofs blown off of houses and things like that. But by and large, it was very contained to that part of the Outer Banks.
So, after hitting the Bahamas, devastating North and South Carolina, where is Dorian headed next?
Nova Scotia. So it is Canada's problem in not too long. So in terms of the current location of the storm, it is 300 miles south-southwest of Sconset in Nantucket. Which is the easternmost part of Nantucket. It is going to avoid Nantucket, which is certainly good. But look at that forward speed of 24 miles an hour. That means the storm is really moving, right? It was moving at 2 earlier. But if you're in the Northeast today, you've got a pretty dreary evening. You can take a look at some of the outer bands have made it all the way up into Orange County, New York, past Hartford, almost to Springfield, Massachusetts.
It's not raining more here in New York.
Right,
when I look at this
you're sort of
map.
between the inner and the outer bands there, right? So the inner bands are what's denoted by that red and orange band that sort of streaks just from about Cape May all the way up almost to Nantucket there to like Pulpus in Nantucket. The outer bands are the ones that you see over New Jersey. And so in between that, you've got a little bit of calm. And I think actually the rain's not going to be all that bad here. However, where those bands are in Nantucket, the Cape, and Martha's Vineyard, you've got the potential for 40 or 60 mile an hour winds tomorrow. It's going to be pretty bad. I wouldn't be surprised if you lost some more of the bluff in Sconset, which is the eastern half that gets battered by some of these storms. It's sort of like a nor'easter would be in the middle of the winter.
Is this the kind of storm that causes beach erosion?
Absolutely. This is definitely the kind of storm that causes beach erosion because the wave heights are incredibly large. I mean, we had 20-foot wave heights off of North Carolina. And then realistically, you've got sort of that same storm surge problem. You're not going to have that in the Northeast. But the reason why you have that storm surge problem there is because you have such a strong area of low pressure, and then behind it, you have an area of high pressure. When you take a look, this is a totally separate note, but if you take a look at Charleston's, tomorrow's high is 94. That's a record for the day.
Is that related to Dorian?
Well, so it's a ridge of high pressure that's building in behind it.
Right.
So yes, but it's interesting when you think about they dealt with the hurricane less than 2 days ago, and now they're setting record highs, and that's something that's going all across the South.
No relief for the weary.
No,
then.
they cannot have
So
relief.
Dorian is downgrading rapidly, though, correct?
Correct. That is true. So we're going to take Maritime Canada absolutely needs to pay attention to this. I can't tell you how rare it is for a hurricane warning to be in effect in Nova Scotia. It's pretty rare because in order to have 90-mile-an-hour winds all the way up in Nova Scotia, that thing really has to be pretty well formed, which it is. But at that point, we still have to turn our attention to the rest of the tropics. This is around the climatological peak of hurricane season. So while the storm makes its way clearly off land, and you can see it sort of in the circle there, we're watching all these other circles off to the right. So
more could be coming,
More
David?
could be coming. That's right. So the one that is furthest north and furthest east, that one we're not worried about. That's your G storm. There's those 2 circles to the south and west of that one. So those are areas we're watching, and it's the one on the right is the one I'm most worried about.
Really? And you see it's picking up some speed.
Yes, potential. So it's got a long way to go, but that's sort of the main development region. But it could potentially, this is 7 to 15 days out, make its way through the Antilles and then potentially either into the Gulf or into the Atlantic. It's way too early to know that one, but this is the kind of storm that can do that, and that would be the H storm of Humberto.
And when exactly is hurricane season over, David?
Hurricane season is over November 30th. We're at sort of the statistical peak on September 10th, and then we get another peak sort of towards the end of September into early October, and then things start declining after there. After November 1, you start to really see things diminish, but we've got another solid month and a half of a really active, potentially hurricane season. We lost the El Nino. We've got all the factors there of a warm ocean. it's really possible that we do see more storms. We want people to keep their guard up. And also, this is the friendly reminder, right? What you saw in Ocracoke is why we tell people to evacuate.
Right.
So for everybody who evacuated in St. Augustine and says, man, I didn't need to do that, well, think of it this way. Would you rather evacuate and go through that headache, or would you rather go through what the people in Ocracoke are going through?
Absolutely. And like you said, okay, through November, we might be worried. Do hurricanes tend to adhere to the strict timetable?
I mean, look, you can have a hurricane in January. It's pretty rare, but
Yeah.
you can.
Okay.
What I would say is climatologically, Sandy happened at the end of October, right? So that was a late one. Michael last year happened at the end of October or the middle of October. So October is really sort of your last big be on the lookout month. And then November, they happen much closer to the U.S. They don't happen sort of far out in this main development region here. They happen much closer to land. They're usually not as strong because the water temperature is eliminated a little bit there.
Getting cooler.
But you know, it's key to not let your guard down, and it's key, again, you know, the folks at the Hurricane Center do such an incredible job trying to communicate the exact risks that people have, and hopefully people get smarter and smarter about the risks that these storms provide. You know, you take a look at what people in the South go through with tornado season, and they've become fairly well adept at knowing when the storm's going to be coming and what they need to do. And with hurricanes, it's the same thing. You know, why they put those probabilistic maps out, why they put these track maps out, is so that people hopefully will get accustomed to how to read them and make safe decisions, because you can't outrun hurricanes when they're knocking on your door and you haven't made the decision. And so listen to your local officials, listen to your local National Weather Service, and we'll be here all throughout the season.
That's right, because we're not out of the woods yet.
No,
David
we're not.
Parkinson, thank you so much for that.
Sure thing.
A humanitarian crisis is unfolding in the Bahamas, where at least 30 people have died as a result of Hurricane Dorian. But with thousands of people still missing, that number is expected to rise. The then Category 5 hurricane was the worst storm to ever hit the islands. Nikki Battiste flew to the Abaco Islands on a U.S. government Black Hawk helicopter.
Flying into the airport in Marsh Harbor with U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Marine and Air Team, we landed at what's now a shelter for survivors who have been waiting in these terminal seats for days, most now homeless.
I have nothing. I left without nothing.
Maxine Ferguson and her 2 teenage sons have been sleeping on this makeshift bed.
Do you have any idea what the future looks like?
Abaco has always been my home.
Her home was 15 miles away. The hotel where she works is gone too.
It hurts me to leave, you know, but my kids matter more.
As they wait,
One child with you?
a group of Abaco Island residents lined up.
Is your home gone here?
Yes, I live in the mart.
What do you have left?
I don't have nothing but me and my kids.
And boarded this rescue plane to Nassau. Survivors with medical needs, pregnant women, and children are a priority to evacuate. The United Nations has estimated more than 76,000 people need humanitarian relief in the Bahamas. 2 hours after we met Maxine, she was told a plane is coming for her.
I'm just gonna go with the flow and hope for the best.
Nikki Battiste joins me now from Nassau. Hi, Nikki. So how extensive are the relief and recovery efforts at this point?
Tanya, it seems like from what we've seen, they're as extensive as they can be. But as one official told me today, the distance between the 2 islands that were really hit, between Grand Bahama and Abaco Island, makes it more complicated to do the rescue and recovery. As we saw in our piece, we were embedded with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection's team who flew us out there. And on the ground, there were a lot of nonprofits working together. We were with USAID that is actually there today setting up an operation on the ground there to try to get people out, get people water and food that they need that are still there. So the effort here is pretty extensive, but there are a lot of challenges. Tanya?
And so, Nikki, some cruise ships are apparently offering to evacuate people. Are most people staying put, or do you see a large group leaving the Bahamas?
It's a good question. There are thousands of people on these 2 islands. We met about several hundred people today who, for the most part, were all homeless. We actually were at, as you saw in the piece, what is an airport, but it's been turned into a shelter. And everyone we spoke with said, we don't have anything left. The places we work are also destroyed. There's no way to make money. We have to leave. So a lot of people are evacuating. I think some people have stayed behind. There are a few people we've been told have partial homes yet. I think some people just aren't ready to leave. Tanya?
And so then what are people saying about the response and how quickly they are getting help? Do they feel that it's been adequate?
It's a good question. I think the feeling is mixed. I spoke to Maxine, who you saw in our piece. I asked her that question, and she said she doesn't want to say she's disappointed by the response. She certainly hopes it had been quicker. We actually just found out moments ago, I should add, that a plane had just arrived to bring her here to Nassau, where she has family. What she did say is all she wanted, and all a lot of the survivors there wanted, was to see a Bahamian government official come there and talk to them and say it's going to be okay. And so far, that hasn't happened. Tanya?
A terrifying feeling to feel isolated from your government there. All right, well, Nikki Battiste, thank you so much for all the excellent reporting you're doing there from Nassau.